Hi everybody, this is Josh Becerra from Agurian. I'm here with Joseph Rueter. Man, I don't even know what title to give you, CEO of Vivront at this point, founder and CEO of Vivront, but you have been like going from thing to thing, and I'm just super excited to have you here.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure. Good to come in and chat.
I was kind of kidding about the whole title thing, but really you have the most unique, I think, entrepreneurial story, and our audience is about SaaS founders, entrepreneurs, and marketers. And so why don't you tell us a little bit about that story, like how you got started?
Well, thanks for being interested. I just live my life and chase curiosity. And I find that interesting. Mm-hmm. So I grew up in Minnesota, in St. Cloud, and it was always, at least, it was like a do-it-yourself family, right? And that do-it-yourself was young, like I was in grade school and we built a house. And I didn't really know any other way. And when the car would break, we'd fix the brakes, and we'd change the alternator, and we'd fix it ourselves. And I remember like getting married and having the car torn apart one afternoon, and my wife came in. She's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm fixing the car." And she goes, "Why?" I was like, "Because it needs to be fixed." And so that kind of approach, if somebody put it together, then somebody can figure out how it was put together and put it back together. It was like built into how I thought about the world before I knew that programming was happening. And I went to school for theology, and that would be like how thoughts are put together, specifically about God. And it was in my master's program in philosophy where those were thoughts about thoughts, like how do you construct ideas, just period. That somebody gave me a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And if you're familiar with this, it's like cash flow quadrants. Totally changed my perspective about like how money moves and how you could make money. And for a philosophy major wondering about what to do with their life, you got to go like, wait a second, there are systems out there, right? I don't need to be a business major, but understanding business would be helpful. Or I don't need to be an art major, but understanding art would be helpful, and design. And across time, I've just chased curiosity. So it was 3D printers at one point, and now my son is like, "Dad, can we get a 3D printer?" I'm like, let's go do that. So it's, I hope similar kinds of levels of success for him, but I'm just chasing curiosity. And that started into agency worlds after school. As a strategist, the philosophers can say things about, hey, we think motivations are a certain way here, the research put together. And then out of curiosity, it was building all kinds of little projects with friends and developers. And some of them turned into little businesses. And one of them kind of sort of did okay, and one of them did a lot better. And that when you've got a couple going at a time and one goes, you just have to kind of shut down the other ones and focus. And that one was Kipsu.
So tell us about Kipsu. I mean, you were there from the ground floor. I think for this audience, it would be really interesting to kind of hear how it is that you really felt like or got to that like product market fit, right? At a certain point, man, we're getting traction. Man, there's like inertia here, and we gotta, shut down or kind of put to bed some of these other things we're working on and really focus on this. So how did you get there? What was it that told you like this is it?
Well, it plays out over time, at least in all the exchanges or experiences that I've had working on businesses, consulting businesses. That kind of like, wait a second, this has the potential, this got legs, plays out over time. And for us, what we did was just find an initial curiosity. Wait a second, like, why can't you text a business? Is where it started. Fast forward 10 years, 15 years, you go like, why are all the businesses texting me? Right? It's the inverse now.
Yeah. So it's your fault that we all get spam texts. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if it's that case. I think the trailing edge, completely unsexy technology of text messaging of 10 and 12 years ago, a lot of people have seen the potential for that. Right. Whether it's like your dermatologist, who's just part of their EMR, says, we're going to text these people.
Yeah, reminder.
And I asked when I was in there. It was appointment reminders. Yeah. I asked when I was in there whether or not they got my, because I was there for the first time, like an initial intake, whatever. Mm-hmm. I said, did you get my permission to text me? And she was like, she blushed and like, I don't know. And so now the systems just do it. And that was the exact opposite when we first started. Why can't you text a business was like, where can we find other groups that were curious about that? Mm-hmm. And initially it was, again, as I was saying, just like my own curiosity. And then a group of us decided to put some structure around it. Yeah. Well, our initial customer base would need an interface on the web that could manage text coming inbound. Could we hack together 5 different things to make it work? Yeah. Right? And then let's get it working. And what became an initial curiosity became initial like prototype customers. Mm-hmm. And out of that, we started to go like, I think we know we have something, but we're in the wrong industry. Yeah. And then we found our initial kind of like fit to that industry. Sure. So that customer base or that market that you're going to go look for has their own dynamics. Yep. And for us, we found that hospitality industry to have a connection to revenue. Right. So it wasn't just like make people happy, because that's not motivating enough to adjust your P&L.
Not for businesses, yeah.
Well, it is for some businesses when your core values are aligned with that, and a leadership team decides to divert resources to it, then you'll be able to sell into those groups. Yeah. Partner with those groups. Mm-hmm. But there's not a lot of those groups to build a market around. So after we knew we had something, after we knew we had it in one market, we started looking for a market that had a connection to really the cash flow of the business. Yeah. And man, you got to work that. You just keep working it. Yeah. And over time, the market penetration will grow. Right. Based largely on like, can you keep working it? Yeah. Yeah. And
then I'm sure that those customers, those first like partners and prototype partners, were the ones who are kind of helping you even like figure out what does this product really needs to deliver even more value.
Yeah, what does it do? There's a Crowne Plaza in the, we had friends of friends that ran a Crowne Plaza down in Texas. Yeah. And they let us kind of do whatever. And we tried a bunch of stuff that didn't work. Yeah. The way that we thought it would work, or didn't get the volume that we know that we produce now. But through the process was able to understand the inside of that industry or that market, or right, and then play the design to those benefits. Right. And now, I mean, 75 countries, 2,800 partner companies, 40 million messages a year. Yeah. I mean, it's not a giant public like company in terms of is it out in front of the public. But so many people check into properties and go like, hey, did you start a thing? They texted me when I checked in here. Yeah. Yeah, all the time. People are like...
Yeah, for sure.
And odds are, with the market penetration that we have, we sent the message. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think Kipsu is one of Minnesota's amazing kind of startup success stories. So good on you.
Yeah. Well, cool. and the team is growing, and we're looking into markets beyond hospitality, not just looking. I mean,
actively trying to figure out.
Actively looking at what the life cycle is of checking into a hotel and where else you check into places like that. Yeah. Is it a living context, like a long-term rental? Sure. Is it an outpatient surgery? Right. Is it, right? And so that team, we're not slowing down. The thing is, it's on the grow. Yeah.
Well, very cool. So, one of the other opportunities that we actually had a chance to work together. Yeah. So you were doing some consulting with like a larger national swim school, or at least regional swim school. And one of the things that in our work together, I was so impressed was how you were kind of going through this like digital transformation with them, right? And you had monitors where, every location you could see exactly what enrollment was looking like, and everybody had kind of their number, and you just like were collecting all this real time, like it was real time data that you were able to then have your hands on for that business. I thought it was like amazing. I don't think there's that many businesses that are able to like piece all of that together. And so I know because of that you're like a big data guy. You believe in data, right? So talk to us a little bit about like that belief in data and like what pushed you to really want to get like that real-time dashboarding and get those like KPIs or numbers, like the ones that you really need to pay attention to. Because I think SaaS marketers in particular need to continually like harp to like leadership, like these are our numbers and this is what we really need to be paying attention to, because otherwise data can just be so overwhelming. Nobody knows what to pay attention to, or they change their focus every 3 months. So talk to me a little bit about like that push for data.
That's a setup. Well, the goal with that team was to deploy the resources of the business well, so that we could make great, solid, well-informed decisions. Great being, are we accomplishing our goals? And in that line, data wasn't just purely measured by a computer, right? The goal was better decision making. And that can come from information from customers. It can come from information from your team. It can come from information that you get in the marketplace, wherever it's public, or wherever you can get your hands on private stuff. And so the goal was, how can you pull together these pieces of information to help an executive team make decisions that are more congruent with reality? Right? And
so it's not just gut feeling.
It's not just gut feeling, And so the approach to data wasn't give me all the digital stuff, or give me all the funnel stuff, or give me all of the click rates, or the ad target groups that are running differently, right? Like our prospects are acting differently than our prospects when we do this thing, right? I mean, that's in the minutia in a way that wasn't the purpose. But over time, when we'd consolidate and compress those data functions, right, of wherever it was coming from, we could start to we'll see the world in a different way, right? Different than our assumptions based on these data sets where you stop and go like, hold on. That's not what we thought was happening.
Right.
Let's check it. And if it is checked, what can we build out of it? And the core on like specific enrollment at certain schools was about deploying resources, right? The benefit, whatever the goals were given the schools. When you're running, we were in 6 states by that time, and you're running a lot of efforts, right? And everybody's got different targets. And
sounds familiar.
And when you can get certain pieces to certain targets, that's really helpful. But when you can get what is data that is near-term past or distant past, the real magic for that team was when we started to be able to make projections. And we could anticipate what would occur over the next 2 to 4 weeks, right? And then adjust ahead of time and keep track of it on a day-to-day basis. Because we could throttle up supply and throttle down demand depending upon what was going on in a particular market or at a particular location. And that starts to get really exciting. And you've got the toolkit to be able to run the operation then. And again, like the goal wasn't to be impressive. The goal was to set up a system where we could just caretake the resources of the business.
So how did you, because I think the crux of that, everybody wants to do that. Everybody would love to do that. And I feel like sometimes the hang up is like, how do you convince like leaders in your organization that, because making the investment in time and resources to actually pull all those data sets together, like I think that's a real struggle for SaaS marketers in particular, we did this survey, right? We did a survey of SaaS marketers to ask them how they thought they were doing. We just published our 2022 report. And one of the things that came out was, SaaS marketers are having difficulty like convincing leaders, or at least having a shared mindset or getting aligned on like, we need to make investments in our data. We need to take these like disparate data sources and actually bring them together. And I think nobody's really giving it the kind of effort or go. So how did you convince leadership to actually make that type of an investment?
Well, we had a supportive board and a very forward-thinking CEO that started that path, right? There's all kinds of dynamics in any business, right?
Yeah.
So getting early wins and being able to communicate about them and to own them and say hey, check this out, right, is really helpful.
Yeah.
But as a consultant, approaching with empathy and saying what's actually on my mind about what I think's on the client's mind is really important.
Yeah.
We stop and go this is $75,000. You can probably flush down the toilet, and we don't know what we're going to get back from it, right? But under which conditions would you be willing to take that leap, right? Yeah. What do we need to get back that you want to know about your particular business?
Right.
And sometimes people don't know how to answer that question, and then it doesn't matter what data is coming at you. If you don't know what data you're looking for, what hunches you're trying to validate or invalidate, it doesn't matter what data comes in the door. You wouldn't really know what to do with it, right? I mean, sometimes you get lucky and stuff shows up and you're like, duh, do that, right?
Right.
Other times it's having hunches, knowing where to go, looking, and getting a good sense of hey, the parameters around this exchange will be successful if this, and that.
Yeah.
How can we craft something that has a higher likelihood of delivering, right? And how can we build a case based on no spend that we have a good reason to believe that if we spend, we're gonna learn something that we can't otherwise. And so in certain places, in bigger firms, right, you've got analysts that help with that effort.
Yeah.
In other spots, you got to really be careful about the team member talent and have people that are nimble. And they're usually young and they're usually scary.
Yeah.
In that they're going to do stuff you don't know how to do yourself.
Right.
But when you sit with them, right, and give them a good sense of direction, hey, we're going here, which is what a leader is to do.
Yep.
Set course, set direction, share the why, and deliver resources for the team to be able to go there. Cultural resources, financial resources, team resources, time resources. Out of that, right, trusting the team and allocating those resources to the team and talent is really important. Those persons who are running the data teams that are nimble, flexible, forward-thinking are really valuable to the businesses they're working for.
Yeah.
Those team members that are wicked talented in data, in my experience, you have to play translator.
Yeah.
You gotta be able to talk in right brain and left brain.
Yep.
And listen, I haven't done this perfectly, right? Lots of fail. Ouch, that hurt, and the scabs have come and gone, and now I've got skin again, but the scar is still there, right? I haven't done this perfectly.
The experience.
Yeah,
there's lots of people who haven't gotten the scars
yet.
So
many scars. However, along the way, we also got wins, and so the game. I don't want to call it a game necessarily, but one of the ways to success on this is to craft early what are small, riskable things to do, and then to build trust and connection and understanding. Over time, to be able to better understand, it's not different than a SaaS market fit. I mean, when you get down to it, it's an internal customer instead of an external customer. We're just trying to go hey, we have data as a product, and we have no one else to sell it to except our internal team.
Yeah.
So how do I understand their market dynamics, their brain space, their needs, what are the priorities of the business? Where does the P&L allow us to do these things? Where's the plan on the resources and the budgeting? Can we see far enough in advance? Can we see 6 months? Can we see 8 months? Can we see 12? Can we see 2 years down the line? It by department. And then see where we can strategically cross those departments to be able to accomplish, uncovering these data maps. But you can have something. The challenge ends up being that the market for what's possible moves faster than the budgeting cycle. And this has been talked about. It's harder to get the CFO to say, right, at some of the companies, hey, I've got a slush fund in Q3. We don't know what to do with, but we know we're going to need it. Hey, we need one in Q4 too.
That doesn't come out of the mouth of a CFO
on
a regular basis.
That's trickier. But I've worked with some wonderful CFOs that aren't of that same kind of the anticipated the reaction, right? And you stop and go, here's what we think we could get from that piece and why it strategically matters to our business. Usually you don't get what you asked for, but you get something, right? And then you have to craft down whatever prototype you run in that quarter.
But in the hopes that you have a little bit of success, you have some of those wins, you can go back and say, see, we can do more of this, right? And get more.
Yeah, and in my experience, sharing the scars, being honest that they're there, it helps get the next one going for the company. And the goal is hey, can we caretake? It's not different than why data, right? Can we caretake the resources of the business? Can we create a context where we can make better decisions?
Right. Well, let's shift gears. Tell me a little bit about the new thing.
The new thing.
Vivront.
Vivront. So it's French. I like that there's 2 V's in it. And it's French, and the French really love cooking.
Yes.
They do a good job of cooking, in my humble view. And it's a future tense of vivre, which is to live, right? So joie de vivre is the joy of life, right? And I went looking for something to do around school lunch. It's the last of 3 promises I made myself when I was flying constantly building Kipsu. It was the first year of my son's life. I was Diamond plus on 2-3 other airlines. I flew constantly, right? 8-10 segments a week was a norm.
Wow.
And I remember sitting on the tarmac in an airport thinking, because there's not tarmac at other airports, I guess. That's where you get tarmac. But thinking hey, this thing's going to work. And when it does, I'm going to do something about school lunch.
Wow.
And
where did that motivation come from?
And it came from when I grew up, right? I mean, we just didn't have a lot of resources. I grew up on the reduced lunch side. And I know those feelings of needing to fill out the form, of turning it in, of getting the meal that's different, And while you could cut a check, I'm actually thinking I'm more interested in seeing what kind of dynamics a brand can do to help not only render the debt a non-issue, but also to better understand school nutrition. I didn't call it that when I started, but as I've connected with persons in the market, I stop and go, wait a sec, it's breakfast and it's service and support on the weekends and so forth. So I think I would brand it different if I were going to go at it, but that's what it's called in the marketplace now. So when I started looking for what business to work on, I've got some time and I have some resources, and I wanted to tinker and play. And I've always been really interested in grocery stores. When I was a kid, and we go to another city, I'd always want to go to the grocery store. When I was in college, the same kind of thing. We'd travel someplace, I'd go can we just go to the grocery store? It's where the people are. Right. The people who are local go to the grocery store. You get a sense of what do we care about here? Yeah, and what do we eat, right? Mm-hmm. It's different here. It doesn't matter what country I'm in. Right. I'm going to the grocery store, and I'm going a lot. So it's really fun. I enjoy that. And I have a number of ideas around aging cocktails or drink mixers, bitters,
sure.
That I think would be really fun to make. And I've done some work building out those brands.
Okay.
But I don't know how to get that to connect to school lunch.
Sure.
So Vivront is about something that everybody has in their kitchens. Mm-hmm. It's sitting right under your nose like text messaging was back in the day, sure. Right?
Yeah.
And if you're lucky, you have a set of knives. In 110 million households, they're dull.
Yeah.
And all of the Airbnbs.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You're only dealing with 5 to 10 million sets of knives sold every year that are still sharp, and all the chefs are going to tell you sharpen once a year.
Yeah.
And the frequency they sharpen is like once a week,
sure.
Right? And maybe $5 to $10 million have been spent in the last year on sharpening knives. Mm-hmm. And so I think this is a really interesting marketplace where mom wants delightful meals. Like, we want delightful home cooking.
Yeah.
And if you could
we want
just
it to be an experience.
Yeah, well, and friends and family around the table drives delight. Mm-hmm. And figuring out what to make is a stressor, getting the things to make is a stressor, actually making the things is a stressor. Yeah. And one of those core elements, when you look around, like chefs ask, like, what more content do you want? Knife skills rise to the top. Wow. Most of us use knives with a lot of pressure, and we've learned how to get a dull knife to cut what we want.
Right.
But when you get a sharp knife, you usually cut yourself because you're using dull knife tactics or dull knife skills, right?
Yeah.
So it's been just wonderful. And what we've done with Vivront so far is go 1-to-1 to school lunch. So every set of knives we sharpen, largely through the mail.
Yeah.
Right? So it's an e-commerce service business.
I purchased one
of your
packets.
Yes, you did.
I still have to send you my knives. But
yeah, well, laziness is...
That's a part of it, but hey, I'm halfway there.
Yeah, halfway there. You take your knives, you shove them in this package, you ship them off, and they come back sharp.
Yeah.
And on the email side, because why wouldn't you set up a great email side, let's start teaching the process of what is a cutting board? Why have 2 of them? What are these crazy French words for cut types? How do you hold a knife? Mm. What kind of knife styles do you want? Right? So usually you have to spend $80, $100 to go to some class to get all those notes. And the ones that I've been to, no chef looks at my skill set. They just spout information and say, here, cut some tomatoes.
Yeah.
And we're looking at this saying, wait a second, we can inject delight back into home cooking.
Yeah.
In a way that starts with sharp knives.
Yeah.
And let's do it on the internet. Let's make it subscription. I mean, everything else is subscription right now.
Yeah.
We're really delighted with the growth. We're really happy to be looking at what comes next and to be talking with our partners in retail, national e-com, just hopefully we'll be in a grocery store near you soon.
Yeah, that's
you can just pick up a package and boom, knives come back
put
sharp.
Put your knives in, send them off, and they come back.
Yeah, and along the way, we pay off some school lunch debt.
Well, and that's, I think, what's really interesting about the whole concept. Yes, sharp knives are cool. Yes, the kind of life hack where I can, ship them to you, you sharpen them, you ship them back to me. And all of the things that I believe, I believe you. You have a sharp knife and you don't have to squish your tomato. It actually will just go right through it, right?
Yeah.
There's something satisfying about those things.
Yeah, you're not serving mushy, squished food to your family,
right. And
you didn't leave the flavor on the cutting board.
Yeah.
Oh, snap.
I know, that's great. But I think the school lunch thing, that piece of it is amazing.
Man, I didn't know what the scope of the problem was. If you're looking at just the debt, it's like $170 per pupil.
Yeah.
Whether they're paying or not, it's $262 million a year in 2019.
Wow.
Things are different in the last 2 years, right? The rules have changed,
sure.
and I've been volunteering in kitchens. It's been fascinating to go well, it used to be, but now it's right. It's so. I have
we'll see how long that lasts.
A deep desire to keep understanding and supporting the people who support our kids in schools.
Yeah.
But I've been stunned with the way, based on what I know now, and I'm happy to like learn anybody who knows anybody to talk about this.
Yeah.
That like an education dollar is the same as a facility dollar.
Mm-hmm.
A food dollar is an education dollar, an education dollar is a food dollar.
Right.
When it comes down to the end of the year, the schools have their inbound resources. Some of them are selling us candy bars. Sure. And right, everything else under the sun that would do some kind of fundraiser that seems sort of normal.
Yeah.
Go to Chipotle and buy, burritos on Tuesday.
Yep.
Yeah, whatever that ends up being.
I've done all those things.
Are there support revenue sources? But the other ones are kind of fixed. I mean, the state, the city, and the federal government have their inbound cash. And if you leave the thermostat run too long on accident over Christmas break, like the money has to come somewhere for the thermal units, right? Like however we ended up getting those. And the same kind of thing can happen on the food side. And it's just really different on the food side because the kid's rumbling stomach, right? We'll give education through our taxes, but if the kid's stomach is rumbling multiple days and weeks on end, maybe the brain isn't functioning either. And so anyway, these are my words, trying to understand the dynamics of this. Yeah. And if we can, we're not going to be able to keep the politics out of this. In the end, can we really focus on education to drive curiosity, to drive growth as humans? Right. Seems like a really delightful way to go about the world.
Well,
so
thank you for your service in that. I mean, I really do think that there's not that many successful entrepreneurs who are sitting on the tarmac and thinking to themselves, I'm going to try to solve this social problem that we have, right? That's not necessarily common thinking for people.
Yeah, so maybe it was
thank you for doing that.
Yeah, certainly. It was 5 to 8 years ago that they had the instinct, and only in the last 6 months. If we're successful, we can get this to go.
Yeah.
The 110 million households, if they sharpen with Vivront, we'll pay off the school lunch debt.
Wow.
And they'll have 100 million left.
Cool. There we go. So last question. I always ask people is this who you're reading or what books or podcasts are you listening to? What's kind of influencing some of your thinking these days?
Yeah, so much. So I have the curse of input as my strength on StrengthsFinder. Mm-hmm. So strategic, ideation, learner, intellection, input.
Okay.
And they're all thinking oriented, right? So it's a little where's the rest of the quadrant?
So you just consume stuff. You're constantly.
So the input side, the podcasts and volume and content coming in is pretty high. But since Tim Ferriss started his podcast, back in, was that 14, I think?
Yeah, long time
really enjoyed his work. So that's the listen side. Of course, I don't have one podcast app. I've got 3 of them,
right.
And they're for different subjects, right? And I just follow certain podcasts in the different in the different apps. From a book standpoint, in the last 2 years, I've come across 2 really interesting books. One from the 90s,
okay,
which with Julia Cameron and The Artist's Way. I had kind of heard rumors about it. As I talk to people, they'll say I've heard about that, and somebody told me I should, but I haven't yet.
The Artist's Way.
The Artist's Way. Right. Inside of it, she kind of deconstructs why artists are artists and the rest of us aren't acting as artists.
Okay.
But we're artists.
Yeah.
That's kind of her premise. And she says, to grow and develop your artist, you need to do 2 things. And one of them is you write 3 pages, long form, hands, written, whatever, every morning, about anything. It could be the dry cleaning. It could be, I don't care, that it's snowing outside, or the lack of wonder in your Colombian roast coffee, because that's what I had this morning, and I don't like Colombia. And I wrote about it this morning. And then the other thing that she's talked about doing is something frivolous, something that allows the artist to play, right? And so it's that thing that you think you shouldn't do, go to Axeman and just walk around, right? Or go to the MIA, or I hung
leisure,
some, I hung some.
This isn't about you making money, just
do
something else.
Can you just detach and do something? So walking around the lakes are always really wonderful. I had a buddy say he wanted to hang glowing orbs in his woods.
Okay.
And I was like, sure, I'll help you with that.
Why not?
And so I'm finding ways to say yes to what is curious, weird things. And so The Artist's Way by Julie Cameron has been a delight.
Okay.
And just reconnecting with self. And the other one came from a coach, and it's Shirzad Shermeen. I think that's sort of close.
Okay.
Shirzad wrote a book off of some lecture series that he had around positive intelligence, and that's the name of the book. Mm-hmm. It's now into like coaching curriculum, and there's an app with ways to do what he calls PQ reps.
Okay.
So these repetitions, like sports analogies of prepping your mind to be able to engage with the world.
Yeah.
It's been really a powerful tool.
Interesting.
And it's about what does your sage do in life versus what do your saboteurs do? Okay. And it's about this inner life. Like, what are you saying to yourself?
Yeah.
Why are you saying that?
Interesting.
And why are you so capable of wonderful and also not?
Yeah.
So those are two books that I've found this year that have been really wonderful.
I know that you'd mentioned that positive thinking book.
Yeah.
It's actually my next book. It's on my nightstand.
Yeah. So it's about your IQ.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your IQ, your EQ, and your PQ. Yeah. Positive quotient. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for, instead of going to the woods and hanging up globes, you were able to come and join us today. This has been a lot of fun. So that'll do it for today, but thanks, Joseph. See ya.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Cheers.